For thousands of years, parents have had to have important conversations with their kids. The idea that this 14-year-old could find something about the scriptures through the portal of the algorithms and have these existential questions asked. For the first time in our 30-year, 40-year history of tracking this, Gen Z and millennials are equal and sometimes past the older generations in terms of their levels of commitment to Jesus. We live in a spiritually open moment. The bad news is people are open to just about anything and everything. We have to disciple this next generation of geeks because they are part of what is going to help make the most of what the church can do in these dark days.
Hi, welcome to the Global Missional AI podcast, where faith meets technology and where we explore how innovation can serve the kingdom of God. My name is Joshua Seal, and I serve as the director of Global Missional AI. For over 3 decades, David Kinnaman has been tracking the pulse of American faith through rigorous social research at the Barna Group. As CEO and president, he's witnessed seismic shifts in how Americans, especially younger generations, relate to Christianity and technology. But David's latest findings reveal something unprecedented. After years of decline, Christian commitment in America is actually growing again. Even more surprising, young people are leading this surge, and it's happening in the most technologically saturated generation in history. In today's presentation, recorded live at Missional AI 2025, David shares 5 critical trends shaping faith in the digital age, from AI replacing pastors in therapeutic conversations to why the church must learn to disciple the geeks who will help shape ministry's future. This will be a 2-part conversation, with this session today being released on the feed. It's actually available nowhere else, and Barna and David have agreed to let us publish it, to next week being a follow-up conversation with David where he digs a little bit more into the data and explains some of these insights. This 2-part conversation is one you won't want to miss and will be incredibly insightful into what is going on in the American church and what implications that has for technology and AI. But before we begin, a word from our partner, Glue. Glue is the technology platform for the faith ecosystem, providing values-aligned AI and comprehensive solutions for ministry leaders. Visit gloo.com to find out more about their tools and resources. We are grateful to Glue for enabling this podcast and the Global Missional AI Summit to happen. Here's David Kinnaman with 5 trends shaping faith in the digital age.
Well, good morning. It's such a pleasure to be here in this room and to be sharing some of what is my favorite thing to do, which is to talk about research stats. We need to bring up the energy with some PowerPoint slides, I think, and some statistics. For thousands of years, parents have had to have important conversations with their kids. But for the first time in our time of technology, the idea that this 14-year-old could find something about the scriptures through the internet, through the portal of the algorithms, and have these existential questions asked, it was brand new, right? And it's sort of like it thrusts us into understanding more about sort of the challenges that we have and some of the opportunities. So as a social researcher, we're going to spend some time talking about 5 different trends, some good news, some bad news, some challenges that we have. All right, so let's talk about some of the trends. We're going to talk about 5 different trends and then some solutions, some ways to think about the context that we're in. So let's get to it. So part 1 is the trends. Part 2 is going to be some solution thinking, how we might make the most of this moment. So here's the thing. People are trying to make sense of AI. We've been working with our partners at Glue for the last 1.5 to 2 years on this particular topic. We've been partnered now with them for about 6 years. But let's talk a little about some of the trends we're seeing. So people fear being replaced. So we'll see here the percentage of all adults. Those sort of 29% of all adults say they feel that their current job could one day be replaced by AI. This was about a year ago, a little less than a year ago. You'll see that millennials and Gen X are more likely than boomers to say that's possible since they're younger. There's a greater sort of sense that could be possible. The next trend here is younger gens believe that God can work in AI. And you'll see that millennials, Gen Z are blue in this particular slide, and millennials the sort of salmon color. And you'll notice that they're more likely to call out that it's possible that God could be working through AI. So I think some really cool things there. We also looked at a whole range of different things that Christians might believe their congregation could use AI for, or areas that these might be better suited for a person, for human touch. And so you'll see a human could do this task better in the dark blue, AI could do the task better in the salmon color, and AI or humans could do the task equally well, but providing spiritual counseling, providing mental health counseling, recommending ways for churchgoers to build better relationships, writing and developing sermons. You'll see, we start to see bigger percentages of churchgoers believing that AI could do this either better or equally well as a human, creating a leadership development plan or recommending weekly sermon topics. So these are areas where half or more believe a human could do it better, but these are areas where less than half believe a human could do this better. Again, this is among U.S. Christian adults creating online content for spiritual development, organizing or creating music set lists for worship, giving financial advice to assist with church budgeting, creating online content for outreach, helping churches reach more individuals online. You can see that 40% believe that it would be better suited through AI. Exclusively administrative tasks. Again, those last two are areas where people believe that the algorithms can do it as well or better than a human. So just think about all of these really interesting places where we're seeing the fusion of technology and ministry and the opportunities that represents. And many people are more willing, they're more ready for this than we probably realize. Okay, so that's trend one. Number two, people are lonely and isolated and struggling. And there's lots of good data about why this might be the case. But there's sort of a recognition that there is, in the era of technology, sort of a greater sense of alienation and separation, and people sort of realize the ways in which they're alone. Really, no generation more than younger generations are struggling in this way. This is from a recent study we did with Gen Z, and you'll see here we're looking at teenagers. Gen Z encompasses teenagers today as well as some young adults. And you'll notice that teenagers are more likely, although still these numbers are still, we would love to see them higher than they are, feeling deeply cared for by those around me, feeling someone believes in me, my life has a purpose. And notice how so many of these percentages drop among young adults when they reach 18 to 24. They're more likely to feel a pressure to be successful, anxious about important decisions, critical of myself, a need to be perfect. And there's lots of good research. The Anxious Generation by Jonathan Haidt is a great book that has begun to turn the tide a bit about the power of technology, the power of social media, the challenge of technology in a formative environment like a school setting, an education setting. And you can just see some of these really challenging things. The tail of the tape is that this generation is really struggling. We also see that it's younger women who are more likely to face some of these negative outcomes than our young men. And this will be a theme we'll talk about in a couple different ways over the course of our next few minutes together. We did a study recently called Beyond the Porn Phenomenon, in which we looked at some of the current rates of porn use within the church and the broader culture. And we had done a study called The Porn Phenomenon about 8 years ago. And we're seeing all sorts of acceleration of porn use. Again, it's not new in human history that there would be pornography, but for the first time in human history, we see that these explicit sexual images are available at the swipe of a finger, and as a consequence, women are using porn more than they did prior to internet porn. Young people, especially really, really young people, are being exposed at earlier ages. Currently, it's more than 70% of men in the church who say they at least sometimes look at porn. It's 44% of women who say they sometimes look at porn. These are just some of the challenges that we have living in the digital age, the challenges to discipleship, that even though we have a Redeemer, there is just this great set of challenges that come in what I call digital Babylon. There's like, how do we really hold back some of those challenging areas? All right, so the third trend then relates to this, is that people are turning to technology for answers. That's why we're here today, to talk about how we can help build better systems, think about the opportunities for redemptive technology, that technology should be used for good. So a good friend of mine named Craig Springer, asked ChatGPT a little bit about how people were using ChatGPT, and this is how AI answered. I think it's actually really instructive for us just to read this together. So here is ChatGPT's sort of response to the ways in which it is being probed. It says, while I don't have exact statistics, a significant portion of the conversations I engage in are therapeutic or emotionally supportive in nature. People often reach out for more than just information. They seek guidance, perspective, a sounding board as they navigate personal challenges. Based on my training, and interactions, I'd estimate that a meaningful percentage, perhaps around 30 to 40%, involve emotional processing, reflection, or advice that resembles a therapeutic conversation, even if it's not therapy in the formal sense. By the way, I just want to pause and note that I love that the robot can't even give us an exact percentage. It's just like, it's about 30 to 40%. We know that AI is going to quickly replace pastors because pastors make up statistics all the time too. That's just a joke. At Barna, sometimes we're misquoted by pastors, you might imagine. I'm seeking therapy for that. All right, it's common for people to need both factual information and a space to process their emotions. I think both can often go hand in hand in these kinds of conversations. And it said, Craig, does this resonate with your experience here? I love it. It's just this, the prompt to keep the conversation going. So then Craig asked a little bit more, a follow-up, and it said, do you think this is good? And it said, I think the therapeutic nature of these conversations wasn't entirely unexpected for the designers. While the primary goal of my design was to provide information, support, and problem-solving, the emotional and reflective element emerged naturally as part of how people interact with AI. Given that many people process their thoughts and emotions by talking things out, it makes sense that this would become a regular use case. The designers likely anticipated that people would seek emotional support, but the extent to which it happens, along with the depth of conversations about personal challenges, this is something Liz was just talking about, may have been more surprising. It shows how much people crave connection and a space to explore their thoughts, even in a context that's more typically associated with information exchange. Do you think this blend of information and emotional support is helpful, Craig? Now, if you're a fan of sci-fi, 2001: Space Odyssey, this is the AI that keeps asking Dave questions so that he can kill him, right? And so this is just like, it struck me as I was reading these responses to Craig, how we're being sort of like given information and this sort of feedback loop. And again, what an incredible time to be alive. Now, isn't it just interesting as we think about some of the comments that AI was giving, just how much that sounds like the need for human connection, the need for the church to be the church. But this is the point that, as we continue to build these AI tools around us, these tools seem to know us better than we know ourselves, which is, friends, the role of the Holy Spirit. That is what we're here to help people do. Now, I joke about the 2001: Space Odyssey. I love that we've been talking about the X-Files. I'm still on season 1, so Daniel, spoiler alert, I didn't realize there really are aliens at the end. That's all right. But hey, I think we could be teaching this generation a theology of dystopian fiction. We love watching, The Matrix or The Hunger Games, or Space Odyssey, or Godzilla, or whatever it might be. Like these notions. Listen, it's crazy, but do you realize that 52% of Americans believe that Jesus is coming back? And 18%, 1 in 6 Americans, think they're going to come back in their lifetime. So there is going to be an end of the world, and most Americans believe that's actually going to happen, that Jesus might actually be a part of that. We are living in a kind of like end times reality. This is part of our story, and I think this is just another opportunity for us to think about how do we help equip this generation for life in this technologically infused age. All right, so here's 2 more trends. The fourth is that people are spiritually open and curious. My friend and colleague Mark Mallock has been working on a study with us on curiosity, on spiritual curiosity, and we asked this something of a false dichotomy of a question, but being certain about my religious beliefs, would you prefer, or being open to wherever my faith leads me? And you'll see that by a factor of about 2 to 1, U.S. adults say they're more interested in a faith of curiosity than a faith of certainty. Again, it's not an either or, but people are curious. This is the new project he was working on with us called Faith for the Curious, And along with a lot of other really cool statistics, we found these really interesting sort of signposts on the road to a really spiritually open generation. This is among all U.S. adults, but just check out these numbers with us. Your mind or soul can leave your physical body at 58%. This is not just among Christians, this is among all U.S. adults. If we look at even younger generations, the percentages are even higher. If you break a mirror, you will have bad luck. It is possible to be reincarnated at a third of all adults. Mind reading is possible. A person's zodiac can have a direct influence on their personality. Supernatural creatures such as fairies or ghosts are real at 35%. Some health conditions can be treated with psychic healing at 30%. I love this statistic, so interesting. 52% of adults say that having a dream that comes true is not just a coincidence. Wait till the AI is helping people to do dream interpretation, right? If it is possible to be possessed by an evil or supernatural entity at 44%, it sort of explains the popularity of sort of paranormal sci-fi, the Stranger Things, that phenomenon. So just super interesting realities about people's spiritual curiosity. We live in a spiritually open moment. The good news is people are open. The bad news is people are open to just about anything and everything. And how can we help people sort of clamp on to something that is real, the reality of Jesus? Now, here's my fifth trend, and this is, I think, one of the most exciting pieces of research we've had in a number of years. As Mark just mentioned, at Barna.com, we just posted this yesterday. We are seeing some really exciting findings. We're working with our partners at Glue on the State of the Church 2025. And so here is a headline banner statement from our research, and that is, look at the trend line. This is the percentage of all Americans who say they've made a personal commitment to Jesus Christ that is still important in their life today. There are other ways for us to measure the depth of discipleship. This is not that measure, but this is just the percentage of Americans who say they are committed to Christ, that is still important in their life. Look at the last 3 years. It bottomed out in 2021 and 2022, right after the pandemic. But the last 3 years, we are seeing this steady increase, and 66% now, 2/3 of all Americans say they've made a personal commitment to Jesus Christ. This tells us that the decline of Christianity is not inevitable. Right? This tells us that people's spiritual trajectory can still be changed. This tells us that the work we're doing matters. This gives us insights into the possibilities of how technology and ministry and human beings and in partnership with the Holy Spirit can come alongside a whole society. Let's continue to pray. Let's celebrate this. This is what we got into ministry for. Let's take this data and ask God, what could we make of it? Alongside there, this is also just really counterintuitive. For 30 years, I've been working at Barna. This is the first time we've seen two findings that I'm about to explain to you. The first is that for the first time in our 30-year, 40-year history of tracking this, look at that Gen Z and millennials are equal and sometimes pass the older generations in terms of their levels of commitment to Jesus. And also over the last 6 years, their faith in Jesus, their willingness to say they might trust him, has been growing at a much faster rate than has Gen X and boomers. I'm so sorry to be a critic of boomers here, but they're sort of flatlining on this, right? Usually there's like a little boomer war cry because the boomer generation just loves to be boomers. Born between 1946 and 1964, the first generation that was named by sociologists because there were so many of you, they couldn't advertise to all Americans at once. And so this boomer generation is sort of flatlining. Look at the first surprising trend is that young people are leading this surge. The second surprising trend is that it's the men who are outpacing women in their growth of commitment to Jesus. In each of the 4 generations, you'll see there's increases, especially among younger generations, which is really interesting and critical for us to pay attention to. So this leads to the conclusion slide for all of what we've been talking about, all these trends. Isn't it amazing and like an incredible privilege for us to be here today, to be talking about these trends, to be on mission with Jesus in this time of great change. We don't have all the answers, but we know who is the answer. And so I am just here to say, we've taken our arrows at Barna for being the bringer of bad news, the harbinger of bad data. Some people say we have the spiritual gift of discouragement. But we've been just tracking the numbers, and now we have some good news to share with you. So go run with it, right? Let's go with this. There's an incredible opportunity today. Let's not waste this. So I've got a couple different ideas about opportunities for the future. The first, we're competing, I think, friends, in an age of hyper-personalization. People think that these algorithms understand them and know them. I mean, I've been there with friends as they're like, what does it feel like to be in love? Or, what might this rash mean? Or, try to interpret certain things about their inner lives. And again, the technology is really powerful, but we're competing in this era of hyper-personalization. And kids, young people especially, are becoming such capable users of this technology. It's sort of becoming their best friend and their advisor and their counselor and their work colleague and all these different facets of our society. But people need this life-giving formational community in which they can best find this in the church. The church has to be able to help a student know how to apply his God-given gifts. And so there's some really interesting things that are happening. So here is the second, if we're living in this age of hyper-personalized, the algorithms seem to know us better than any Holy Spirit might ever seem to know us. I think the church needs to be a place where people find their unique masterpiece, where it's discovered and developed. The Ephesians 2:10. We have this rich theology that each person is gifted by God to do things in the world, to be all that they were created to be. And so we need a place of community. We can disciple the geeks. We can make a difference. People need life-giving formational community in which they can best find that in the church. They need to understand that they're a masterpiece. It's nothing against big churches, but big churches will have to find a way, especially to create this sort of community and intimacy, and smaller churches will have to do that too. And we're going to have to find a way, friends, I think in a place like this to say we have to find a way to disciple geeks. I asked ChatGPT for a little help on this. Are there geeks in the Bible? And here's what we came up with. Bezalel and Aholiab, tabernacle designers. Their geek type was artists, craftsmen, and engineers. You can read some of the description that ChatGPT was so kind to give me. Joseph was a dream interpreter, an economic strategist. A geek type was a data analyst and economist. We can continue on. This is only on one prompt, but we get 6 different types. So Daniel, the wise advisor, and another dream decoder, tracking back to the Spiritually Curious project. Geek type was a scholar, a linguist, and an analyst, more Babylonian than the Babylonians. Esther and Mordecai, political strategists, geek type policy experts and strategists. Esther's courage is famous, but Mordecai's careful tracking of royal family affairs and political maneuvering was key. He uncovered a plot to assassinate the king and later devised a plan to save the Jewish people from destruction. And then 5 and 6, Nehemiah. We had a chance to hear about this from Davis this morning. The geek type is the logistics guy and builder and planner. And then Luke, our one mention from the New Testament. The geek type is a doctor and a researcher and a writer. I appreciate Luke's very careful. He's always been one of my favorite gospels, and part of that is that attention to detail. All right, I have just one more thing I want to show you. It's going to take me a minute to go through, but I'll show you this here. Perhaps the best way for us to disciple these geeks, like me, perhaps like you, is through spiritual mentoring. We did a huge study. This is some of the benefit of social research. We did a huge study with some of our partners, World Vision, Biblica, and Alpha, where we asked teenagers around the world a little bit about their spiritual openness. Not just Christians, but this particular set of data I'm going to show you is from the Christian young people we interviewed. You can see the countries we interviewed and the number of interviews, just a massive data set, which was really cool. And then we talk about the Christians, which is a smaller segment here, but spiritual mentoring was defined by these 5 segments. I won't read all of those to you, but just take a quick picture if you want to. You'll notice that these are very relational. this idea that we're intergenerational and connected with someone who might teach us to pray, who might teach us to read the Bible, who might help us to know who we are. Again, this notion of being known in a community. You'll see that the research told us that we had 12% of all teenagers, Christian teenagers around the world, who had high spiritual mentoring, meaning that they had, you'll see 4 or 5 of those statements. Moderate mentoring was 1, 2, or 3 of them, and 0 statements was low mentoring. You'll see that 55% had moderate mentoring, and 32% had medium mentoring. You'll see my sample size was 13,000 teenagers around the world in about 14 languages. Now just look at the differences between those who were spiritually mentored, still describing themselves as Christians. All these young people describe themselves as Christians, but look at the well-being, the correlations with well-being among those who are spiritually mentored. The fact that they are 66% deeply cared for by those around me compared to just 34% who have low mentoring. Someone believes in me, optimistic about the future, secure in who I am, able to accomplish my goals, satisfied with my life choices. Continuing on here, they are much more likely to prioritize these kinds of good outcomes in their life. Caring for their emotional health, caring for people in poverty. I mean, just look at some of the differences here. And again, it's not a small application because the spiritual mentoring is something to really work at and to craft, but look at the huge difference that is shown there. Last sort of slide on this data is just look at the difference just in terms of even the resilient disciples or being Bible engaged or being justice motivated. Huge, huge gaps. We can help these young people to know who they are, and spiritual mentoring might be the key to doing that. We need to disciple the geeks. And this is a mentor. This is a spiritual mentor who's trying to help Timothy. This is Paul trying to help Timothy understand his faith and his roots. And he says, I remember your genuine faith, for you share that faith that first filled your grandmother, Lois, and your mother, Eunice. I know that same faith continues strong in you. And this is why I remind you to fan into flames the spiritual gift that God gave you when I laid hands on you. And there's a real idea of the physical. It's not just a digital impartation or just some sort of gifts assessment out there in the world, in the ether. But it's like we went through a process to figure out what you might be called to do based on who you are, your spiritual backstory, your spiritual legacy. This is, I think, a wonderful template for how we think about where is your legacy, who are you now, how are you gifted. We are going to impart and call you to greatness. And then this whole section continues on and finishes with this, at least in the slides I have. And it says, for God has not given us a spirit of fear and timidity in an anxious age and an anxious generation, but of a power and love and self-discipline. But we have to disciple this next generation of geeks because they are part of what is going to help make the most of what the church can do in these dark days. Thank you.